Hello, everybody. I'm Kevin Daly for PATH. Welcome to Answers, Special Education Today for October 14th, 2025. In this edition of Answers, there will be a special education update by yours truly. There will be a segment called Special Education's Greatest Hits, which is an occasional segment about best practices for parents to follow. There will be a conversation with Deb Bibbins about the nonprofit organization she founded called For All Ages. And of course, at the end, there will be time for Q&A with participants. So get ready to send in your questions at the end. Answers is brought to you by PATH, a nonprofit organization that for more than 30 years has supported Connecticut families and children with disabilities. For more information about this webinar, please email me directly at kdaly@pathct.org. While you're online, be sure to check out our website at pathct.org and check out our online presence on Facebook, X, and the PATH YouTube channel, which has a video of every one of these webinars. And now it's time for the fine print. This webinar is not legal advice, it's not healthcare advice, it's not advice of any kind. It's the sole property of PATH and not to be used for any other purpose, although we do encourage you to share links to our YouTube videos. Here's the special education update. You may have heard the federal government shut down on October 1st. Our leaders in Washington, D.C. are fighting over a proposed budget, and we're now in the 14th day of the shutdown. Shutdowns like this have happened before, like 4 times during the last 30 years, twice in 1996, for a total of 26 days back then, again in August, again in 2024 for 16 days, and again in 2019 for 34 days. That one was the longest shutdown in history. Hundreds of thousands of federal workers have been furloughed. There's a talk of substantial layoffs and mass firings of federal workers, including workers at the U.S. Department of Education. As reported by Education Week last week, the Education Department laid off nearly 87% of its employees. Now, this is in response to the shutdown, and it's after the department lost about half of its employees who were let go earlier this year. Connecticut parents are asking. They want to know how the shutdown and the loss of federal funds will affect their children's special education. This concern is especially timely because a big chunk of the federal money schools receive for special education was scheduled to be distributed on the 1st of this month, October 1st. In Connecticut, the funds should go from the U.S. Department of Education in Washington, D.C. to Hartford and then to the local school districts. So what will happen to special education without federal funding? Will schools need to cut back on special ed programs? Will your child be forced into a lesser program? Well, there is some good news for special education, that is. The Education Department plans to keep federal funds for special education flowing during the shutdown. And it seems to be happening. According to Education Week, state education departments all over the country are receiving their October 1st payments. The same can be said for Title I, the federal program that sends funds to schools in low-income areas. The Education Department plans to keep Title I funds flowing during the shutdown as well. This is important because most school districts in America have at least one Title I school, and many school districts in America, not to mention Connecticut, have every school as a Title I school, every school in the district. So this is important money. Now, the same can also be said for the federally funded school lunch programs. The Education Department plans to keep federal funds flowing for school nutrition programs, like the National School Lunch Program and the School Breakfast Program. K through 12 education programs might not fare as well, and that's why there's a yellow check mark there. The Education Department says it plans to maintain funding for programs that would be significantly damaged without funding, like school operations, but it's unclear what will happen to funding for other general ed programs. This is something we don't know yet, but we will eventually find out. Head Start is another federally funded program that is facing cutbacks. Head Start provides free early childhood education and support for low income families from infancy through age 5. Head Start is not guaranteed. Instead, according to the Department of Health and Human Services, it will work to, get this, folks, support funded programs, including issuance and management of grant and contract awards for programs with multi-year or supplemental funding. Well, and I hope that's clear to you. It isn't clear to me. This is something we need to watch as well. Title I, School Lunch Programs, Head Start. These aren't special ed programs. I mention them because special education students don't live in a bubble. The things that affect general education students also affect special education students. So what will this shutdown do to your child's special education? So far, it looks like your child's special education program will look tomorrow like it did last week, and for the short term. Of course, that's not to say the entire future looks rosy. The proposed federal budget cuts funding to general education by about 15%. Federal programs that support special education in the long run are disappearing faster than a speeding bullet. For example, just last Friday, everyone at the agency that works to administer federal funding for special education was let go from the Education Department. Who will replace them? Coming up is my conversation with Deb Bibbins. But first, special education's greatest hits. Best practices for parents to follow when raising a child with a disability. Today's hit is preparing for the transition to adult life. And public high schools do a lot to prepare our children for the transition to adult life. Every public high school has a guidance office where guidance counselors help students find continuing education and employment. Special education students get a transition program that helps them prepare for life after high school. Special ed transitions begin at age 14 and can continue as long as age 22 if needed. Schools do much. But that's not what this hit is about. This hit is about what parents face when their child makes the transition to adult life and how to prepare. I'm going to talk about some big decisions parents need to make. Legal decisions, financial decisions, healthcare decisions. You don't make big decisions based only on what you hear from some guy during an online webinar. Consult the appropriate professionals before making big decisions. And in this case, I'm thinking professionals in the legal professional, attorneys. I'm simply talking about some possible starting points that could be taken, that's all. And here's a fact that parents need to face. When your child reaches the age of 18, it's the age of majority. Most of your rights as a parent are transferred to your child, who at age 18 is now considered to be an adult. I mean, rights like the right to control legal decisions, financial decisions, healthcare decisions, the kind of decisions you've been making on their behalf all along. You lose it unless steps are taken. More about that in a second. Another fact that parents need to face. Before your child graduates from high school, you deal mostly with one public entity, your school district. After high school graduation, there will be many entities to deal with. Entities like college, employers, state agency, community services. Dealing with multiple agencies and entities can get complicated, like dealing with the many snakes on the head of a Medusa. But unlike the Medusa, these entities are here to help your young adult. Learning how to work with them and get the most from them take an education. Be prepared to learn. One good way to learn is from other parents who are in a similar position to yours, parents who have already had the experience. If you'd like to connect with a parent like that, PATH, the nonprofit organization I'm with, has a parent support program where we can fix you up, you, a parent of a child with a disability, with another parent of a child who has a similar disability, but they are a veteran of what you're experiencing. Drop me an email, kdaly@pathct.org. I'd love to hear from you and get you involved. Now, for some people, making the decisions that come with the age of majority can be too much to handle on their own. This is why we have conservatorship, guardianship, power of attorney, and healthcare representative. Conservatorship requires a court order. The judge must find your young adult is unable to make decisions on their own. As conservator, you would have control over pretty much every aspect of your young adult's life, theoretically, for the rest of their life. Guardianship also requires a court order. Again, a judge would have to find that your young adult is unable to make decisions on their own. As a guardian, you would control your young adult's personal and financial decisions for the rest of their life. There are many types of powers of attorney. Getting your young adult's power of attorney could give you control of their legal and financial matters, or it can be restricted to just certain matters. It's up to you and your young adult. That's because power of attorney is a voluntary agreement. It doesn't require going to court and having a judge find that your kid is incompetent. All it takes is a written agreement that is signed by both parties and witnessed by a notary public. Power of attorney can be discontinued too. It's not necessarily a lifelong thing. Becoming your young adult's healthcare representative can give you control over your young adult's healthcare decisions. Like power of attorney, it doesn't require going to court or a decision by a judge. All it takes is a written agreement that is signed by both parties and witnessed by a notary public. Like guardianship, power of attorney can be discontinued. It's not necessarily a lifelong thing. Many high schools inform parents about conservatorship and guardianship, but they never mention power of attorney and healthcare representative. It's unfortunate that they don't. It's important to know there are alternatives to conservatorship and guardianship that are not as drastic. Please join us for the next edition of Answers on November 18th. Did you know that loneliness is at record levels here in America? And this is something that affects our children and also parents of children with disabilities. It affects our children because, for a lot of reasons, they tend to be isolated, sometimes by their peers, sometimes unintentionally or intentionally. And of course, as parents of children with disabilities, we are in a unique situation, unique from what many of our own peers experience, parents. It's easy to feel like you're on your own, which is not a good feeling to have. Deb Bibbins founded a nonprofit organization to combat loneliness. It's called For All Ages. I spoke with Deb Bibbins the other day about what she's accomplished. Let's listen in. Hello, Deb Bibbins, and welcome to Answers.
Thanks so much for having me, Kevin. It's wonderful to be here with you today.
Deb, I wonder if you could tell me, why are social connections important?
Sure. Social connections are actually the foundation of our health. So as more research has come out over the past decade or two, we know now that social connection in a very positive way fosters our feelings of purposefulness, fosters our feelings of belongingness. And it really is something that enables us to have positive mental and physical health. It's something for all of us to be thinking about. As humans, we are social beings, and we need to be connecting with others.
Well, experts say that loneliness is rampant in our society. To what extent is it affecting people?
Loneliness has actually been growing over the past 5 or 6 decades to the degree that now it is recognized as a public health crisis. More than 60% of us, and that is from tweens and teens all the way through to older adults, are feeling lonely on a regular basis, which is pretty frightening. And we also know that adults with developmental disabilities experience loneliness at 1.5 to 2 times the rate of adults that are neurotypical. And so all of the work that we do at For All Ages is about fostering social connectivity to the ability that we can, and about teaching others about the importance of social connection.
What causes loneliness?
You know, the cause is different for different people. So I'll start by saying that loneliness is different from social isolation. Those two terms are often used interchangeably, but they're quite different. Isolation is something that you can see, it's objective, right? Someone may be alone in a room or in a space. They are not around any other humans, and so they are isolated. Loneliness is this feeling that we don't have the amount of positive social connection in our lives that we believe that we should have. And it's an individual thing. It's not something that can be diagnosed. And so clinicians sometimes struggle with this. It's something that is a feeling, and it's the feeling that we don't belong, right? We can be in a space with others and feel lonely simply because we don't have that connection and that sense of belongingness with the folks that we are around.
I see. And so this feeling of loneliness, does it affect different age groups more than others?
Yes, yes. Thank you for asking that. As the research has come out over the past decade or so, and a lot of it is actually before the pandemic, I'll say. So the pandemic certainly exacerbated it, but it's been growing. Young adults are our loneliest population, and that is around the age of 18 to 24. Many people are trying to understand what the causes of this are for this particular population. Many believe it's the time when people typically graduate from high school or ending their time with their friends and their family that they have come to know since birth. And they are thinking about doing something different, whether that be going off to college, or whether it may be simply undertaking a new job for the first time after graduating. The other population that is very lonely, but at a little bit of a lesser degree, are older adults, and those are typically adults 70 plus. Um, that being said, every one of us across the entire age spectrum are feeling some sense of loneliness. There are times in our lives for each of us, I think we can look back and say, all right, I felt lonely at that particular time. And I may not have understood the feeling, but it really was loneliness. And it can happen during times in our lives where there's a transition, right? So I mentioned, perhaps someone is graduating from high school. Perhaps they're moving to a new job, right? They're starting a new job, even with people that they don't know and they have to get to know, right? They're new peers that are sort of thrust upon them and they have to find their way. Sometimes loneliness creeps in for new moms, right? I'll put that out there. One of the loneliest populations is actually new mothers right after giving birth, because now for many of them, they had been working and now they're home raising this human, right? They have this tremendous responsibility to raise this new little human. Um, People that are retiring sometimes feel lonely after the first 6 months of retirement because they're thrilled and engaged about retiring, and then they settle into their next chapter, if you will. And for some, they haven't thought about what that means and how they are going to continue to have the social connection in their lives that they had when they were working and they were going into an office or going into whatever their job is, and being around colleagues and peers. And so the episodic loneliness, we don't worry about that so much because it's something that comes and goes, right? And it's short term, and people often understand it and then take action. Where we really struggle and what we really are seeking to help are the people that suffer from chronic loneliness. which again is about 60% of us.
Yeah, that's quite a statistic. And well, for some reason, I can understand why those of us who are well into adulthood could feel loneliness and experience that. But it's quite striking that young adults seem to feel that sense of
Mm,
loneliness at the same level as those of us who are, like I said, well into adulthood. So that shows there is a real crisis here. And of course, when talking about groups of people who are experiencing loneliness, what I often see with the parents that I work with are feelings of loneliness, isolation, being withdrawn on the
mm.
part of parents of
Yes.
children with disabilities. Can you talk about
Yes. Thank
what
you
you've
for
learned about that?
yes, thank you for asking about that. You know, caregivers are a population of that are experiencing loneliness at tremendous rates. And so whether you are caring for perhaps, you know, a parent, right, an older adult parent, or whether you are caring for a child with developmental disabilities, it's that caregiver role, right, where you know, you want to do your best and you put your all into that care and giving that care, and you forget about yourself, right? It can be very, I'm going to use the term isolating intentionally because you can be focused on caring for one person, but you need to take a step back and say, all right, how am I caring for myself? And what is my social connectivity looking like? It's one of the reasons, and I know that we'll get into the project that we did, thanks to some funding from the Connecticut Council on Developmental Disabilities, but it's one of the reasons that we engaged with caregivers and we wanted to hear from them. In addition to hearing from adults with developmental disabilities and support agencies, we really wanted to understand what are the needs of caregivers that perhaps are not being met. And I know, like I said, we'll get into this, but I was heartened by the amount of uh, honesty. I think the willingness for people to be honest and to share authentically about how difficult it is and how emotional it is.
It is emotional. I know it is just
Yes,
from having
yes,
contact with so many parents who are going through that. Well, I understand that you founded For All Ages to address the feelings of loneliness that are rampant in our society. Please tell me more about
yes,
your organization and what you're doing to address this.
yes. Thank you, Kevin. So in 2019, so about 10 months before the pandemic, I, alongside my co-founder, Gary Sikorsky, founded For All Ages with an understanding that there was a need. There was a need for work around social connection in the state of Connecticut and the need to foster social health. It was not, I'm going to tell you with all honesty, it was not in my intentional game plan to found a nonprofit. I went looking for a nonprofit with this mission after watching a family member suffer from loneliness. And I couldn't find one. And I thought, okay, I have to do something. And, you know, with the wonderful blessing and support of my husband, he said, I think you need to do this. And so here we are now, 7 years later. The entire mission, as you said, Kevin, is around fostering social connection for people, for all of us, for Connecticut residents. We do that through intergenerational programming, for one, bringing the generations together in really creative, fun ways. I'll share with you one of the things that we did early on is we invited people to come out to different community areas, whether it be a library or in the case of the town of Simsbury, the senior center, community centers and other places where people, third places where people come together naturally. And we sat people down and they thought that they were coming to paint a rock, right? So that was our fun teaser to get people to attend. Come paint a rock, come be part of this community gathering. At that time, it was for Simsbury's 350th anniversary. And we were inviting people to create one of 350 rocks that we were then going to hide around town. But what we did in the first 30 minutes of each of those 12 events that we hosted was gather people together without putting paintbrushes out and getting people to talk to one another. And we had icebreaker questions. We encouraged people to sit with people that they didn't come with and that they didn't know in order to meet someone new and to foster friendships and to foster dialogue among community members. Um, Fast forward now to 2025, we're doing the same sorts of things. And we like to use different ways to bring people together. So one of the things that we started during the pandemic that we're still doing is a simple phone call program. This particular program is aimed at the two loneliest populations, the young adults and the older adults, and we pair two people one-to-one for a weekly phone call. We pair them based on common interests. We send them conversation starters each week, and this is a 12-week program that runs twice a year. We have now had 800 people participate in this particular program. It happens to be virtual, right? So it's a phone call program. So we avoid the transportation barriers and we avoid some of the technology barriers. If someone has a telephone and they are able to use that phone to connect and interact with others, then they can participate. Um, in another way, one of the things that we do is host community events. And the whole idea is to bring community members together in a way where they're contributing to creating the event. We are going to be doing this, for instance, coming up in November in Rocky Hill. Our Unite by Light event will bring people together in the weeks leading up to November 14th and to decorate luminary bags, right? So they're going to be part of this event. We'll then bring volunteers in town and surrounding towns together to actually assemble the luminary bags. And then we'll bring another group of volunteers, community members of all ages and abilities together to place, and we say light the bags, but they're actually, the little electronic votives, so they're flameless and safe. And they'll place these lights out and the luminaries out in a 1 mile circle around Old Town Center in Rocky Hill. And then everyone is invited to come out and stroll or roll along the path, however they can and however they feel, or just hang out at the community center and enjoy connection and community there. It's a wonderful event, and we're really proud of the fact that it's fully inclusive. It's a fully inclusive event. Anyone can participate in helping to create it, and anyone can come out and observe it and be part of it and just feel the good vibes and the magic of the evening.
Well, that sounds awesome. All of it. 800 participants. That's incredible. That's really awesome.
Yes.
Tell
Yes,
me,
800 for tea at three. I'll just share, excuse me for saying this. All in, our programs have touched the lives of 40,000 people, right? That's a big number, and we're really proud of that. So I just wanted to throw that in, Kevin.
I'm glad that you did because that's so much more impressive, and that's awesome. It is. What is the Connecticut Collaborative to End Loneliness?
Thank you for asking. In 2021, as we were out talking with clinicians and other community members, we realized that the problem of loneliness and lack of social connection was so much bigger than we anticipated when we launched the organization in 2019. And we said, okay, what can we do? We can't solve this problem on our own. We really need two things. We need to highlight the great community organizations that are already touching this space, maybe for a specific population or a specific community, but they're doing really great work and we want people to know about it. The other thing is we knew that if we could bring together like-minded people who cared about this issue across sectors, public, private, that we could amplify the awareness of the need and that we could actually make change happen and build a movement within the state of Connecticut around fostering social health. And so fast forward to 2023, our former US Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, declared loneliness essentially a public health crisis here in the United States. And a week after that, we launched the Connecticut Collaborative to End Loneliness. We set up the website, which is endlonelinessct.org. We've kept the website very minimalist, as simple as we can, because we want people to focus on the message and the impact, and to be thinking about how they themselves can take action. I think it's really important for us to know and to recognize that each one of us has the ability to improve our social connectivity and the social connectivity of our loved ones. And so a lot of the work of the collaborative has been fostering that and has been about driving down the stigma associated with loneliness, which is really unfortunate. But I think we have to face the fact that there is a stigma associated with it. And we want people to feel comfortable saying the word lonely, right? Sometimes we go out in the community and people are afraid to even say that word, right? They don't want to admit to being lonely because they think people are going to think lesser of them, or they think it's going to mean that people are going to think there's something wrong with them. And what we always say is, oh, if you're human, you have experienced loneliness. It's okay. And by the way, there's a no cost cure, right? There's a no medication, no cost cure. It's simply taking an intentional step to go out and connect with others. So that's a little bit about the collaborative's work to frame up, I think, where you're going is leading to our project that we did this year.
That's incredible. And of course, working in coalitions with other groups, that's how you maximize the work that you're trying to do. So this
Yes.
is a good illustration of that concept. Deb, what is the Pathways for Inclusive Connection project?
Thank you for asking, Kevin. So we are so grateful to the Connecticut Council for Developmental Disabilities for giving us some funding to undertake a 9-month project this year, focused very intentionally around adults with developmental disabilities. And what we did is we went out in the spring. We hosted multiple listening sessions for adults with developmental disabilities, for caregivers, and for support agency personnel to hear about what was working really well in fostering social connection and what was not working. And we spoke to more than 75 people, the majority of which were adults with developmental disabilities, about what they were missing in their lives. And like I said, what was going really well. After listening and really looking at over the summer all of the feedback, we created a series of action guides. And these action guides are out on the Connecticut Collaborative to End Loneliness website, which is endlonelinessct.org, under Inclusive Connection. And we have produced an action guide for the adults with developmental disabilities themselves, front and back. So it's a simple 2-page guide to foster social connection. We actually developed 2 guides because we've realized that there was a need for this for caregivers. One's an overview and one's a deeper action guide for how caregivers can help support their loved ones in fostering social connection. We decided to go the next step and actually develop also an action guide for community members. So for neurotypical members of the community who engage with adults with developmental disabilities, what might we be able to do to help foster social connection and give them the comfort level in doing so? So we created a community member guide. We also created an in-depth guide for support agency personnel. And lastly, we created a legislative proposal guide. Let's put it that way. It's about letting people understand What we heard very specifically from caregivers and from adults with developmental disabilities about what was not working and how legislatively and programmatically we might be able to make some improvements there. So we put that guide out there for everyone to see. So all of those guides, they're all housed, easily downloadable under the Inclusive Connection page of endlonelinessct.org. And we really hope that people will take a moment, they will go to the website, they will download them and read through them because it's important, number one, because there's a need, number two, and because the folks that we spoke with, both the adults with developmental disabilities and caregivers, said, I really want people to hear what we're saying, and we want people to know. One of the things that I think caught us by surprise as we were doing these interviews, and we had a team of 5 people doing them, was how stressful and emotional this topic is for caregivers of adults with developmental disabilities, and about how little information that they are able to get about opportunities that may be available, or, and I'm say or intentionally, about how little opportunities there are to connect. So for instance, I had a mom of an adult with developmental disabilities sit with me with tears streaming down her face, saying that she drives 20 miles each way once a week to bring her adult son to a program. And she's grateful for the program. And her son loves the program. But she said, I wish there was something closer, right? And there isn't anything closer, so I come here. So wonderful that the program is happening. Great that it happens at the same day and time each week, right? Those are both checks, yes and yes. But unfortunate that she has to drive 20 miles each way to get her son to this really impactful program that he loves attending. And so what I hope is the takeaway is that people start thinking about what can they do to bring people together, adults especially, who sometimes are left to figure out social connection on their own with their caregivers, about more local activities, and also about how communities can foster inclusiveness by bringing adults with and without developmental disabilities together in their own communities.
Excellent. Deb, this has been a real eye opener. Thank you so much for talking with me.
Thank you so much for having me on, Kevin. I'm really grateful to you for helping shine a light on the problem and the solution, and really grateful that hopefully now additional folks will go out and will be able to leverage the action guides that we created, which are available for free to everyone.
Yes, yes, be sure to take a look. Thank you, Deb.
Thank you. Take care.
Deb Bibbins is awesome. And if you have any questions for Deb, you can reach her through her organization's website, forallages.org. And now it's time for live Q&A with participants. If you have any questions for me, please send them over. And let me just see if there is anything. I see nothing in the chat. I see nothing in Q&A. Folks, we're in danger of getting out early tonight. And with nothing in the questions, yes, we are going to get out a little early tonight. Thank you, thank you, thank you for staying tuned to this edition of Answers. And be sure to join us on November 18th for the next edition of Answers as the journey continues. Be good to each other.